China is a country with a rich history and culture that has undergone significant changes over the centuries. Today, we'll be comparing pre-communist China with communist China. Pre-communist China refers to the period before the Chinese Communist Party came into power in 1949, while communist China refers to the period after the establishment of the People's Republic of China under the leadership of Mao Zedong. To start off, we'll look at economy. One major difference between pre-communist China and communist China is their economic systems. Pre-communist China was largely agrarian with a small industrial sector. Agriculture was the main source of livelihood for the majority of the population, and the economy was organized around a system of feudal landlordism. Wealth was concentrated among a small elite, while the vast majority of the population lived in poverty. The country was also subject to foreign exploitation, with European powers, Japan, and the United States carving out spheres of influence and extracting resources from China. In contrast, communist China's economy was planned and controlled by the state. After the establishment of the People's Republic of China, the government nationalized industry and collectivized agriculture, redistributing wealth more evenly. This led to significant improvements in living standards for many Chinese people, particularly in rural areas. The government also implemented policies to promote industrialization, which led to the rapid expansion of the industrial sector. However, the planned economy led to inefficiencies and shortages in certain sectors, and there were trade-offs between economic growth and other priorities, such as environmental protection and social welfare. During the Maoist era, China's economy was heavily centralized and focused on achieving self-sufficiency. The government implemented a series of economic campaigns, such as the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, that were intended to rapidly modernize and industrialize the country. However, these campaigns were often disastrous and led to widespread famine, economic instability, and social upheaval. In the post-Mao era, China's economy shifted towards a more market-oriented system, with the government gradually allowing private enterprise and foreign investment. This has led to significant economic growth and poverty reduction, and has also raised concerns about inequality, corruption, and environmental degradation. Next, let's take a look at politics. Another significant difference between pre-communist China and communist China is the political system. Pre-communist China was ruled by a series of dynasties, with power concentrated among the emperor and his court. There was little political participation or representation for the general population, and the country was subject to periods of instability and conflict, including the Opium Wars, the Taiping Rebellion, and the Boxer Rebellion. In communist China, political power was concentrated in the Communist Party, which controlled all aspects of government and society. The party claimed to represent the interests of the working class, and to be working towards a socialist utopia. But critics argued that it was an authoritarian regime that suppressed dissent and violated human rights. The party used propaganda, mass mobilization, and political education to maintain its grip on power, and dissent was not tolerated. This led to a number of human rights abuses, including the suppression of political opposition, the use of forced labor, and the persecution of minority groups such as Tibetans and Uyghurs. The Chinese government also uses a complex system of surveillance and censorship to control information and limit political dissent. The Great Firewall of China, for example, blocks access to foreign websites and censors online content that is deemed sensitive or critical of the government. The government has also implemented a social credit system that monitors citizens' behavior and assigns scores that can be used to determine access to certain services or opportunities. Next, we'll talk about sex life. Sexual attitudes and behaviors have been influenced by a variety of cultural, social, and political factors in China. In pre-communist China, sexual attitudes and practices were heavily influenced by Confucianism, which emphasized traditional gender roles and emphasized the importance of family and social order. Premarital sex was strongly stigmatized, and was seen to be a threat to social order and family honor. Up to marriage, women were supposed to be chaste and virginal, and extramarital relationships were severely forbidden. Other non-heterosexual activities, like homosexuality, were also severely stigmatized and frequently punished. However, despite these conservative attitudes towards sex, there was also a long tradition of erotic literature and art in China, Erotic novels and illustrations were popular among the upper classes, and sexual themes were often explored in traditional Chinese opera and drama. China has a rich history of erotic literature and art that dates back centuries. While conservative attitudes towards sex were prevalent in Chinese society, there was also a significant tradition of exploring sexual themes through art and literature. The portrayal of sexuality in these works was often subtle and symbolic, rather than explicit. One of the foremost celebrated cases of erotic literature from China is the Jinping Mei, a novel composed within the late 16th century. The novel tells the story of an affluent shipper and his sexual misuses with different ladies, giving a glimpse into the sexual culture of the time. Another well-known work is The Plum with the Brilliant Vase, a novel composed within the early 17th century that highlights expressed sexual substances. Sexual topics were moreover explored in traditional Chinese opera and drama. One illustration is The Peony Pavilion, a play from the Ming Dynasty that tells the story of a young lady who falls in love with a scholar in a dream. The play features several erotic scenes and explores the topics of love and desire. Although conservative beliefs regarding sex were common in China, there was still a lengthy practice of investigating sexuality through art and literature. These creations provide a distinctive understanding into China's sexual culture all through the ages. The communist regime came into power in 1949, and with it came dramatic changes in sexual beliefs and behaviors. With a focus on the value of sexual education and reproductive health, the government aimed to advance a more equal and progressive view of sexuality. Sex education became a mandatory part of the school curriculum, and the government established clinics and hospitals to provide access to contraception and other reproductive health services. The government also sought to promote gender equality and to challenge traditional gender roles, which had previously limited women's sexual agency. Despite efforts to modernize sexual attitudes and practices in many countries, conservative views continued to persist in various ways. For instance, even as premarital sex became more common, it still carried a social stigma in many cultures. Extramarital affairs were also widely viewed as morally wrong and were strictly prohibited. Non-heterosexual behaviors, such as homosexuality, remained stigmatized and were often penalized by law enforcement, making it difficult for individuals to express their sexuality freely. Overall, the question of sexual attitudes and practices in society remained a complex and multifaceted issue in many parts of the world. While there were efforts to modernize these views and behaviors, conservative attitudes and censorship policies continued to limit progress in many areas. Nonetheless, the ongoing struggle for sexual rights and freedoms remained an important issue for many individuals and communities around the world. In conclusion, sexual attitudes and practices in pre-communist and communist China were heavily influenced by traditional gender roles and cultural values. While there have been some changes in sexual attitudes and practices over time, traditional gender roles and conservative attitudes towards sex continue to have a significant influence on perceptions of sexuality in contemporary China. However, there's also a growing movement towards greater sexual openness and acceptance, which is challenging traditional attitudes and promoting a more inclusive and diverse vision of sexuality. Lastly, we'll be talking about the beauty standards of males and females. Beauty standards have always played an important role in Chinese society, and have been influenced by a variety of factors, including traditional gender roles, historical events, and cultural influences. In pre-communist China, beauty standards for men and women were heavily influenced by Confucianism, which emphasized traditional gender roles and placed a high value on physical appearance. For women, the ideal beauty standard was known as Liu Hai cuts his hair, which emphasized a small and delicate face with narrow eyes and high eyebrows. Women were expected to have a slim and petite figure, and were encouraged to wear makeup, especially red lipstick and rouge, to enhance their features. Long hair was also seen as a symbol of femininity, and women were expected to keep their hair long and well-maintained. For men, the ideal beauty standard was known as Liu Bei's sword, which emphasized strength and masculinity. Men were expected to have a strong and muscular physique, with broad shoulders and a prominent jawline. They were also encouraged to have a thick beard, which was seen as a symbol of masculinity and virility. These traditional beauty standards were reinforced through art, literature, and popular culture. For example, female characters in traditional Chinese opera were often portrayed as delicate and submissive, with long flowing hair and delicate features. Male characters, on the other hand, were often portrayed as strong and heroic, with broad shoulders and a commanding presence. With the establishment of the communist government in 1949, there was a shift towards more gender-neutral beauty standards. The government promoted a natural beauty ideal, which emphasized simplicity and health over artificial enhancements. Women were encouraged to wear minimal makeup and to keep their hair short, while men were encouraged to focus on maintaining a healthy physique rather than on building bulky muscles. Despite these changes, traditional gender roles continue to play a significant role in beauty standards in contemporary China. Women are still expected to have a slim and petite figure, and men are still expected to have broad shoulders and a strong jawline. However, there's also a growing movement towards body positivity and self-acceptance, which is challenging traditional beauty standards and promoting a more inclusive and diverse vision of beauty. In conclusion, beauty standards in pre-communist China and communist China were heavily influenced by traditional gender roles and cultural values. While there have been some changes in beauty standards over time, traditional gender roles continue to influence perceptions of beauty in contemporary China. However, there's also a growing movement towards body positivity and self-acceptance, which is challenging traditional beauty standards and promoting a more inclusive and diverse vision of beauty. In recent years, there has been a resurgence of interest in traditional beauty standards in China, particularly among young people. This trend has been influenced by a variety of factors, including the rise of social media and the increasing influence of Western beauty standards. Many young women are turning to cosmetic surgery to achieve the delicate features that are valued in traditional Chinese beauty standards, while young men are embracing the little fresh meat trend, which emphasizes a delicate and feminine appearance.